Portugal's greatest contribution to the world might be their custard tarts, but their stadiums are almost as good. There are some very interesting designs amongst them, including a one-of-a-kind stadium. So here are the Primeira Liga grounds. I'm gonna try with the Portuguese pronunciations, but I'm almost certainly gonna fail. Estádio da Luz. Translated into English, the name is Stadium of Light. It inherited the name from the previous stadium that occupied the site, so no, they didn't copy Sunderland. As for the design of the stadium, well, some Premier League fans might notice the similarity with Arsenal's home. Less so on the outside, but the interior is basically identical. However, once again, the Portuguese were first. So it's Arsenal that has the made in China variety. Interestingly, it's the largest stadium in the country, but there's actually another stadium in Lisbon with the title of National Stadium. You'll see that in a minute. Estádio do Bessa. The stadium looks quite plain and simple from the aerial view, but the facade of the western stand is actually quite flashy, and I mean literally flashy. However, the interior is where the stadium really shines, ironically. Firstly, it has a very interesting colour scheme. I also quite like the exposed concrete in the corners, and the best aspect to the stadium's design is the steeply stacked double-tiered stands, which brings those sitting up top closer to the field, and probably makes for a more intimidating atmosphere. Estádio Nacional da Jamor. As the name suggests, and as I alluded to earlier, this is actually Portugal's national stadium, despite it not even being close to the best stadium in the country and certainly not the biggest, as I said. But history's got to count for something, and this stadium was built in the mid-40s, when most of the continent was in crisis and Portugal was in the mood for building stadiums, I guess. It has a very simple C-shaped seating layout. There's not much in the way of amenities, but it's still a solid stadium, I suppose. Estádio Municipal de Aroca. It's the smallest stadium in the league, but I'm not going to hold that against it. As you can probably tell just by looking at the sparsely populated backdrop, the town has only a little over 40,000 residents. And considering that, it's not too bad. There is a lot of uncovered seating, but in Portugal, I'm not sure that's such a bad thing. Estádio Municipal de Braga. This was the particularly unique stadium that I was referring to in the intro. The stadium was built on the site of a former quarry, and rather than trying to conceal that fact, they have leaned into it. One side of the ground is bordered by one of the big rock walls of the quarry. The other end opens up to an expansive view of the valley. Even if you disregard the unusual surrounds, the architecture itself is quite distinctive, with the weight of the roofs being supported by one another. Dozens of cables cross over the top of the field and connect the two roofs. There's a lot to love about this ground. Estádio Antonio Coimbra da Mota. This is clearly a lot less spectacular than the last one, although that vibrant blue and yellow colour scheme looks rather nice in the sunshine. An interesting little tidbit about the ground is that about a decade ago, one of the stands was about to collapse during a match, so all the spectators had to be quickly evacuated. I wonder which one was it? Was it you?
No, it wasn't me.
Okay, what about you?
No, I am strong.
Okay, then that leaves you then. I have low blood pressure. Fair enough. Estádio Municipal de Famalicão. This stadium underwent some much needed renovations in 2015. I say much needed because until then, one stand had concrete bench seating, and that was the uncovered stand, so I can't imagine how unpleasant that would have been on a cold rainy day. The main stand, I guess you'd call it, has an interesting segmented design. Perhaps it is actually several stands, I don't know. But I don't think it'll be like that for long. Further renovations are planned. Estádio Cidade de Barcelos. With its covered all-seater stand on each side, it wouldn't look out of place in the UK. Well, it would actually because of the Portuguese advertising. But other than that, it wouldn't really. While the blue sky would look a little out of place, but other than that, it wouldn't really. Considering that the exterior is mostly bare concrete, it still looks pretty good, as does the interior, which is a lot more vibrant. Estádio do Marítimo. This stadium is located on the island of Madeira, which, I know what you're thinking, no, it's not the home of the Madeira cake. That is just named after Madeira wine, which did actually come from here. Anyway, unlike the wine, this stadium hasn't been around for all that long. Although football has been played on this site for nearly 100 years, this stadium was rebuilt starting in 2009. As a result, we have a beautiful Madeiran stadium with a beautiful Madeiran backdrop and a moderately attractive Madeiran flag there on the seats. Estádio Municipal de Chaves. As you can probably tell, this was formerly a track and field stadium, but one end has had a new stand added, leaving this stadium with a bit of an odd layout. But they say variety is the spice of life, and this stadium has plenty of that. I believe the other end will eventually get its own new stand as well, matching the others, but for now, if you are unfortunate enough to sit in this stand, bring a telescope, or binoculars at the very least. You're almost certainly not allowed to bring in a telescope. In the sunny seaside town of Portimão, we have Estádio Municipal de Portimão. What are the chances of that? These seats were actually originally green, but fittingly, they have faded into an almost aqua colour, giving the stadium a seaside colour scheme. But more importantly, the main stand is very steep, which serves an actual functional purpose. Interestingly, the stadium was privately owned for a long time, and after inheriting the land, the new owners wanted to kick the club out. Thankfully, the local government purchased the ground from them so the club could stay. Estádio Municipal do Capital do Mundo. It's a recently refurbished, well, mostly rebuilt stadium. The old design was fairly typical of the Iberian Peninsula, but the new stadium, like the one we saw earlier, was built in a similar style to what we might call a British-style stadium. They built it bit by bit, with the last of the original stands only being demolished a few years ago. Nowadays it's looking pretty simple yet sleek, both inside and out. Estádio do Dragão. As you could have guessed, that name means Dragon Stadium in English. Not because it looks like a dragon, it looks like a stadium. But it's simply named that because dragons are cool, and they've got a little dragon up there on their crest. Just like Benfica Stadium, this too has a clone elsewhere in the world. Once more, this one was built first, so you can't accuse the Portuguese of being copycats. Although their language is suspiciously similar to Brazil's. Anyway, I love how clean this design is. It's 20 years old, but I think it still looks cutting edge, and will do for a while. Estádio dos Arcos. As you can see from the aerial shot, the eastern stand of this ground was recently demolished, with a new uniquely designed fully covered stand set to be built in its place. For now, the other sides are not only very basic, but very green as well. Not just these ergonomic seats, but there's a big grass berm behind the southern end, and just some extra lawn at the northern end behind this big green wall. Even the floodlight towers are done up in club colours. Just like some of the castles in Portugal, Estádio José Alvalade doesn't shy away from the vibrant colours, with this loud green and yellow exterior. It did used to be even more colourful, however a few years back they replaced these seats that made a bag of Skittles seem monochromatic, and replaced them with this more toned down colour scheme that is a little easier on the old retinas. I think I'd agree that's made it slightly better. Anyway, it matters very little during the match. Estádio de São Miguel. We're back on the islands with this one, the island of São Miguel to be specific. For the most part, it's a very basic ring of uncovered seating. However, there is an interesting seating situation over at this end. Well, I'm not even sure it's seating, just looks to be decorative, I guess. I think there have been plans to give this stadium a wraparound roof, but for now, it's just these guys that are sheltered. Estádio de Afonso Henriques. This is yet another stadium that was built or redeveloped for Euro 2004. Oh wait, I haven't mentioned that yet, have I? Yeah, you may have noticed a lot of stadiums in this league were built in 2003. That's why. Portugal actually made the final of that tournament and lost to Greece. As I alluded to, it was technically redeveloped rather than demolished and rebuilt, and so it kept a similar layout to the old stadium. The most interesting aspect of which is probably this stand with a huge upper tier that sits above the teeny tiny lower tier. Estádio do Futebol Clube de Vizela. Thankfully, that's the last one, it's been a struggle. This place is doing its best impression of the one in Braga. Firstly, the way it's been carved into the hill, as well as these empty ends. But I'm not sure it has the same allure. Very few stadiums do. Still, after some updates in recent years that replaced drab concrete steps with vibrant blue seats, the stadium could be described as easy on the eye. But yeah, I'm regretting making the comparison. It looks nothing like Estádio de Braga. So there you have it. All of the Primeira Liga stadiums. As always, I'll try to pick a favourite. I do really like this one, but I just love how unique this one is. I have to choose this. If you're new, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, have a good one.